Hello and welcome to the Sunday 28th September edition of A Proud Malcontent. It's Sunday the 28th of September. The world is still going to shit, and I, Pierre Bell, am still proud to be a proud malcontent. Uh, Bashing on because we've a lot to cover this morning. Later on, Stephen Duncan will be back with us, and he'll be crunching some of the numbers around the matter of so-called supermajority. Bit of a favourite topic of mine, so we could have some interesting conversation around that, hopefully. Uh, uh, Before that, my Sunday rant today. Well, first of all, it's a wee congratulation to the Sunday National. If you haven't got a copy, it's absolutely well worth the money this Sunday. Uh, I've selected three articles in particular to mention, and I apologise for the image on the first one. This is David Pratt's column, and he's talking about his writing, I should say, about Tony Blair and this proposal that Tony Blair move in as the governor of Gaza. After the Israelis are finished wiping out the Palestinians. The thought just appalls me. It's absolutely appalling. But it just seems so typical of the world that we live in at the moment that a person like Tony Blair could be considered for such a job, and that could be considered such a job in the first place. This is blatant imperialism. We're almost going back to the 18th, 19th century here. Sending in a governor, it's just an appalling thing. And another appalling thing, Ruth Wishart, again, another column, very much worth reading. Ruth Wishart's column, I have to say, is generally worth reading, but particularly today, because we're on this subject of the world going to shit again. And a large part of that is the anti-science idiocy of Trump and RFK Jr., and how that's a threat to us all. And this is you probably heard about Trump and his rant about Tylenol and paracetamol to us. And how pregnant women shouldn't take it, and there's absolutely no scientific basis for such claims at all. And he's appointed as the head of health, RFK Jr., who's this crazy conspiracy theorist who has been the cause of outbreaks of preventable disease in the US because of his anti-vax. Should I call it a philosophy? It's more of an ideology. It's appalling, and it's dangerous. It's very dangerous, as these outbreaks of preventable disease demonstrate. Measles is one of them, and measles can be a very serious illness, but there are many more. I think of all the diseases over the decades that have been conquered by largely by vaccination programs. Smallpox comes to mind, but there's also Ebola and AIDS. There are so many diseases that have been conquered, but it's an ongoing fight. And idiots like Trump and RFK Jr., that's Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., part of the Kennedy clan. Idiots like them with their anti-science posturing that's a real threat to all of us, because in this world, as COVID-19 showed, as it demonstrated in this world, disease anywhere is a concern for everybody. Transmittable disease anywhere in the world is a threat to us, wherever we are. And it has to be fought everywhere. And these people are destroying our ability to combat these diseases. The main article that I've picked out, though, for today is, you might find this a little surprising, Jerry Hassan's column, titled "Here's How the Left Can Defeat the Far Right in the UK." And as I've said in my comment on this, it's not very often that Jerry Hassan's column gets the accolade of must read. But this one it certainly deserves that accolade, and I have no hesitation in awarding it. It is a must read. I've picked two paragraphs that I will read out just to give you the gist of it, and perhaps tempt you to go and read the whole thing. Mainstream politics have failed. Not only do they not deliver in policies, they do not represent the interests of most people, instead, slavishly serving the rich and powerful. They do not connect with everyday concerns and instead offer across the political spectrum identikit politicians talking a discombobulated, cliche laden language of technocratic solutions and thinking. That is a one paragraph description of politics today, and that's politics worldwide. Nice one, Jerry. Nice one. And towards the end, Jerry Hassan has this to say. The dynamics of centre-left parties, Labour, the SNP, Greens in Scotland and England and Wales, the US Democrats and others, are about the interests of the professional middle classes and what is in their best interests. No wonder for 2 decades the right has had such an easy task posing as the insurgents. If we as citizens do not get our act together, the appeal of the populist right, far right, and fascism will only grow. How many wake up calls do we need? We are, as we speak, in the second Trump term, nearly 10 years after Brexit, sleepwalking towards disaster. That's a very portentous paragraph there. It's a bit doom laden, but I think justifiably so. And it's this point about how the far right, like the likes of Farage and Reform UK, they're succeeding because they are what I've chosen to call the disruptor, and what Jerry refers to as posing as the insurgents. They are the ones that have taken on what was traditionally the role of the left, and being the ones that are going to come in and shake things up to the benefit of all. Supposedly, it's totally false, of course, but they've been allowed to take on this role, to take on this appearance of being the insurgents. They have been very good at being the disruptors. There's another bit where Jerry says something about the language that is used and how they have co-opted the language of revolution to appear, the insurgents, and to appear to be representing change for the better. Jerry has his own ideas about the ways to defeat them, but I think we would probably agree that the best way to defeat the disruptor is to be a better disruptor. Uh, and that is what the left is failing to do, and it's what the independence movement is failing to do. We are failing to be a disruptor of any kind. We've become the establishment. The independence campaign and the independence movement is just political wallpaper at the moment. It's Farage and his crew that are the main performance. We're just the backdrop. We have to crash that stage at some point, and we need a Scottish nationalist, left of centre disruptor, loud and extravagant, and saying things that we're not supposed to say, because that's the way you get attention. That's the way you take attention off Farage. Don't criticise Farage for getting all those appearances on the BBC. He's getting those appearances because he's doing his job correctly. He's doing it right. Don't criticise him for that. Emulate him. You don't have to be a shithole like Farage in order to do it. You can be a perfectly decent person and still have things to say that shake up the politics in the country a bit. Yeah. So we need a better disruptor. Right, the other part of that's the main part of my rant, which is supposed to be onto by now, was to be about the international recognition scare story. Now, I picked this partly because it came up in comments on an article that I wrote, and I honestly can't remember which one. I think it was slightly off topic. But somebody started on about how the international recognition was a big problem for the independence movement and for the Scottish UDI plan in particular. And we've been at this, we've had this before, we've had this so often. We had it all through the 2014 referendum campaign. And I've often said that I've quipped that the No movement, Better Together, would not have succeeded without the help of the Yes movement. And I've selected this because it's a perfect example of how the Yes movement helped the No campaign by echoing and amplifying its propaganda. The anti-independence side made a big issue of international recognition, and the Yes movement picked that up, or a large part of it did anyway, picked it up and ran with it, so that it became an even bigger issue. So I wrote this article. It started off as often happens, it started off as a comment or a reply to some of the comments that were being made about international recognition. And I needed to point out that the Scottish UDI plan deals with the issue of international recognition. It deals with it in two ways. It deals with it by partly by making the constitutional issue a matter of human rights, specifically the right of self-determination. But mainly, the Scottish UDI proposal deals with the issue rather the non-issue of international recognition by being impeccably democratic. That is the way that you gain international recognition, and is by not being impeccably democratic that you lose that international recognition. However, it's not a long article, so I'm going to read through it for the benefit of those who would rather have the audio than read. I know there are a few. And here we go. There is no reason, and I stress the word reason, to think international recognition will be an issue when Scotland's independence is restored. I emphasise the term reason as opposed to wanton scaremongering. There is no shortage of the latter. It may be that some countries decline to formally recognise independent Scotland. That is no impediment to restoring independence. If it were, no country could ever regain its independence because there is always the possibility that formal recognition will not be granted by 100% of the world's nations. Formal refusal to recognize a nation's independence is relatively rare and almost always politically motivated while having no justification in terms of international law. There would be no way to justify rejecting Scotland's independence if the Scottish UDI plan is followed, because the Scottish UDI process is impeccably democratic. Democratic legitimacy is ensured at every stage, beginning with a mandate acquired by way of a plebiscite election to assert legislative competence in constitutional matters and culminating in a confirmatory referendum in which the people vote on a firm proposal to end the Union. I'll just add that there are many nations which function perfectly well as independent states while lacking universal formal recognition. In many cases, the average person would be surprised to learn that these were not fully recognized states. Kosovo is commonly referred to in the scaremongering about international recognition. It is true that Kosovo does not have universal formal recognition, but it is recognized by over 100 UN members, including the US and most EU states. There is no way to know precisely how many of the remaining nations may have informally recognized Kosovo by, for example, reaching a trade deal. The Republic of China is formally recognized by only about a dozen UN members, but it has de facto relations with many more and functions perfectly well as an independent state. Not even all 193 UN member states have universal recognition. Israel, for example, as well as both South and North Korea. Try telling them that they can't be independent nations. Elsewhere, Somaliland has its own government, currency, military, and elections, but is not formally recognized by any other country. It nonetheless functions as an independent nation. I repeat, international recognition is a non issue. It cannot be a prerequisite of independence, as there is no way to be recognized as independent until you are independent. Duh. All any nation seeking to gain or restore independence can do is ensure that there can be no justified objection to the way it is done. The process must be unimpeachable. The Scottish UDI process is impeccably democratic all the way through. Even that cannot guarantee universal formal recognition. But as I have demonstrated, universal formal recognition is not essential. I'll just add that one of the nations least likely to refuse to recognise Scotland is England, and I emphasise least likely. Scotland is too important in too many ways for England to refuse recognition. So when people start telling you how Scottish UDI would leave Scotland isolated and unrecognised, just laugh at them. I hope that has clarified for some people the issue of international recognition, or as I should say, the non-issue. It isn't an issue. During the 2014 referendum campaign, the Better Together sought to make it an issue, and the Yes movement helped them do so. We don't want to make these kind of mistakes again. Okay, it's time now to welcome our resident number cruncher, Stephen Duncan. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Peter. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. I've enjoyed my wee rant this morning. I've got that off my chest. You know, I can carry on with the rest of the show quite readily. There might
Good.
be a few things I have to get off my chest about our discussion today, though.
A very entertaining rant it was too, particularly international recognition. Very pertinent.
Right,
Okay.
so I'm going to hand over to you and put up the presentation and just let you explain to the viewers exactly what it is that we're talking about today.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. So this is the third part of the third and final part of the AMS game, which is looking at the Holyrood election voting system and the allocation of MSPs. If you remember, 2 weeks ago, we looked at the proportionality of the Holyrood Parliament. That was the first part. And the second part was last week, which looked at the vote share that was required, or likely to be required in order to win list seats. So the third part is looking at the possibility or the feasibility of a supermajority being obtained, and in particular being obtained by the independents supporting parties. So we'll move on. With that.
Before you start, Stephen, should we at this point clarify what's meant by a supermajority, or will you be doing that later?
I was going to do it during it, but let's do it now. It's not actually been defined by any of those that purport to advocate the supermajority approach to obtaining independence, or they say is to a means of obtaining independence. But in the standing orders of the Scottish Parliament, they do define what a supermajority is in terms of votings and decisions. So, in fact, in Chapter 11, Rule 11, subpoint 4, the supermajority is defined by the number of members voting for a proposition is at least 2/3 of the total number of seats for members of the Parliament, and that's on the Scottish Parliamentary website.
Yep. It's I just need to point out it's 2/3 of members. It's not 2/3 of the quorum in the chamber. Is 2/3 of the total number of members.
Members is the word that you use, so that means,
yeah.
But probably 86 of the MSPs. There's 129 MSPs, so 86 or 85 if the presiding officer was excluded from the vote. I'm not quite sure whether they are or not, but it's that of that 85 or 86 members.
I think the presiding officer has a vote in some matters, but that's only to do with the appointment of certain officials and to do with the actual running of the Parliament, and not with the work of the Parliament, but to do with the running of the Parliament. Yeah. There are only a couple of things, 2 or 3 things for which this supermajority, this genuine supermajority, as set out in the standing orders and the Scotland Act. There's only a couple of things, and they're really not relevant to any discussion about the constitutional issue. They're really a side issue. But what is spoken about as a supermajority is actually just a large majority, or a very large majority. It is not a supermajority as that is defined in the standing orders of the Scottish Parliament. That is the point that I wanted to make. And I think we've both made it now. So, hell, if anybody hasn't got it by now, there's something far wrong with them.
Okay, so that's the introduction, and moving on to the first slide proper. So what we're looking at here is the possibility of really people moving their second vote from the SNP to another independence party in order to shut the unionists out. So these three charts we've got up on this slide all relate to the recent last week or the week before last, the end of the prior week, the opinion poll from the More in Common polling organisation, which looked at the voting patterns, voting intentions of the sample they drew for the 2026 Holyrood election, and it's got mapped to that the number of projected seats on the back of that. So in the leftmost chart, you can see the breakdown there between on the popular vote, and the yellow bars of the SNP. They're always the largest ones, or have been for the last 10 years, although a lot lower than what they have been maybe a couple of years ago. So still on 37% of the constituency vote, 32% of the regional list vote. If you look at the seats that will be allocated on the back of that, they'll get 59 seats on the constituency, only one on the regional list. The Greens will get 6 seats on the list, according to this poll. Just homing in on the list itself, on list vote share, you can see on the thirdmost chart there's the breakdown of the pro-independence party vote. It's about 40% in total, 32% for SNP, 8% for the Greens. And that's, as you know, if you count the numbers on the seats, that's going to give them 7 seats according to this particular opinion poll. So you can imagine that people are going to be saying, once again, if they have already, that it's another 1 million wasted votes. I'm using that put that in quote marks, Peter. I'm not saying they're wasted myself, but if you look in 2016, they only got SNP only got 4 seats for 42% of the vote share on the list. 2 seats last time around, 40% of the vote share. Nonetheless, that projects the total pro-independence party seats as being 66, or just over 1/2 of the seats available.
It might be worth just thinking about that for a moment, because although according to this poll, is projecting only 1 list seat for the SNP, things are so tight that for the nominally pro-independence side, things are so tight that that 1 seat could make a difference. It could certainly make a difference. We have to assume that the SNP is once again going to be the party of government. I mean, the size of those yellow bars tells you that. They'll either be the party of government or in some form of coalition, and the dominant party in that coalition. So the 1 seat could be the difference between no majority and a majority, or between a very small majority and a working majority. So it's not like that 1 seat is insignificant.
No, it's a kingmaker almost, in this case.
Yes, indeed.
Because you're right on half of 65, just over half of 129, obviously. 66, 1 plus a little bit. So it's just, it is marginal. You're right. It could make all the difference. So let's move on to the next slide. So what I've done here is take this exact same poll and sort of generate a scenario whereby 25% of the SNP share of the list vote, which is 32%. So that's about just under 80% of that vote proportionally gets transferred to another party, which we're calling the New Scotland Party.
So was there any reason you chose 25%, or is that just a wild guess?
Was a wild.
You're a statistician. You don't do wild guesses.
No, it was. I took a stat. I thought 25 is a nice round number. I'll take that. and put that through the model that I developed. And it turns out, as you'll see as we go through this, well, I'll not let the cat out of the bag. You'll see at the end of the slide what I mean.
Okay.
But it was a random guess.
Aye, there isn't actually a reason. There's no evidence to suggest that 25% of the SNP vote will go to ALPA or other nominally pro-independence parties. It is an assumption for the sake of modelling. Yes,
right. That's right. I could have taken 30. I could have taken all 32. I've just taken a large number because people are suggesting, or it has been suggested, that everybody should swap their vote out from the SNP. Everybody who wants independence, swap the vote out in order to shut the unionists out of Holyrood, or a lot of them out of Holyrood. These are the same charts again, just with the new with the hypothesized scenario put through there. You can see on the left-hand side, the share of the SNP votes down to 7%. It had been 32. And you've now got the inclusion of a black bar on that chart, 25% above it, and that's what I'm allocating to this New Scotland Party. Instead of it going to the SNP, it's going to the NSP. Now, on the middle chart, you can see what that does in terms of the seats when you map the seats to it. And you get...
I'm sorry, Stephen, but you're using the NSP again. This is just for the sake of modelling. There is at present, you did that deliberately, didn't you? There is at present no plan or intention for NSP to be standing candidates in the 2026 Holyrood election. I just want to stress that. I will also stress that there is a vague possibility, very slight possibility that could change, but at present there are no plans. You're just using NSP as a neutral example in this, correct?
Yes, Neutral Scotland Party.
Yeah.
Okay, so middle chart, you get 23 seats for the NSP. On the back of switching over 25% of the SNP's list vote, and so that's quite a significant change, and you'll see what that does in total. It gives you a total of 26 seats if you would add up the black bar and the green bar for the Greens, because you lose the SNP seat goes to NSP. The single seat that they got in the actual raw poll, if you like, that's now disappeared into and been reallocated to the NSP. Similarly, the Greens have lost 3 seats; they've gone to the NSP. So, but more importantly, if you look at the rightmost bar chart, you've still got a total of pro-independence votes of vote share of 40%. What's happened is you've moved around a bit. So, you've got 25% for NSP, 7% for SNP, and still the 8% for the Greens. The difference is the Greens have lost 3 seats, the SNP have lost 1, but the NSP have got 23. So a net gain, significant net gain. So if you add this number of seats together, it's in fact 85 seats. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Peter, did I choose that 25% at random? And I did. It turns out that it gives you 2/3 of the majority, or if you consider 85 to be, the 2/3 in terms of if the presiding officer wasn't voting, it just turned out that way. So it makes a big difference in terms of the number of seats that are allocated, but no difference to the vote share. All you've done is cannibalized the independence vote share. There's no increase in the vote share, and that's something that I'm sure we're going to come back to.
Right. 2 points come out of that. One is that it doesn't increase the vote share. So if you're talking about a de facto referendum based on vote share rather than sheets, that's a big fail for that approach. And the other point, I don't know if I should be making this point at the moment, but I've forgotten what my other point was. So it's these are just nominally pro-independence parties. But I think you're going to be coming on to that anyway. I did have another point to make, and it is now gone completely out of my head. Sorry.
It will come back, I'm sure. It was important enough. So if we move on to the next slide. Right. So what is a little bit of history here, and then what does this mean in terms of independence versus unionist supporting parties in Holyrood? The leftmost table looks at all the elections since 1999, all 6 of them. And if you remember last week and probably the week before, we were looking at this disproportionality index. And that's constructed by looking at the percentage of votes that a party gets and comparing that to the percentage of seats that it gets. So you divide the percentage of seats by the percentage of votes, and you get this index. If there's an index of 1, then your vote share and your number of seats, or the seat share, is perfectly proportional. Above 1, you're overrepresented in the parliament. Below 1, you're underrepresented. Now look at these yellow, these yellow cells, if you like, on that leftmost table. Apart from 1999, the independent supporting parties, which essentially are the SNP and the Greens, but earlier on in 2003 included the Scottish Socialist Party and included some independents like Margot MacDonald, you can see they're all above 1. And particularly since 2011, quite a bit above 1, 1.17. So that's saying that in 2011, when the SNP got the overall seat majority in the Parliament, standalone majority, their vote share is 17%, proportionally speaking, higher than their seat share is 17%, proportionally speaking, higher than the vote share that they achieved. And that's been the case the last 3 times, 1.17, 1.11, and 1.14. Now, if we move to the rightmost table and looking at the more uncommon poll, on the raw poll, the actual poll itself, the index is 1.25, the highest it's ever been. So you've got a total vote share of 41% for independents, but you get seats of 51%. So you're getting 25% more, relatively speaking, than your votes, in terms of seats, than your vote share would merit. That increases still further to 1.61 if you adjust that poll for the supermajority and assume that the NSP take the number of seats that we've just been talking about in the previous slide. So very, very significantly skewed. There's 2 ways of calculating seat projections, by the way. I think I mentioned this last week. I'm not going to go into the detail of them, but there's an additive method and a relative method. I've done it both ways. And even for the relative method, you can see that the indexes are higher again, 1.34 and 1.66. So just to emphasize, when the supermajority approach, if it were to work, the quote marks, the transferring of these votes does skew the proportionality of the Parliament very, very significantly.
This is important because if this works, and it does depend on a very significant part of the electorate participating.
Yeah.
You've taken the 25% figure of SNP voters. If it does work, then this skewing, the proportionality of the Parliament is wrecked. It's destroyed. And the democratic legitimacy of the Parliament derives in large part from proportionality. So this is doing real harm to the Parliament. But there's also the possibility of an intervention from the Electoral Commission here, surely.
Quite possibly. I mean, all the talk about the supermajority we've had for the last 4 or 5 years. There's been a lot of noise about it, and a lot of noise about gaming the system. And and wouldn't that be good if we used the British rules against the British, if you like? So it's something that would be deemed to be, you would think, deliberate, and it's possible that it could be assumed to be an abuse of the system. And the Electoral Commission could use that as a pretext, no doubt prompted by the British government and the British state, to do something about that. Maybe to declare the election invalid. I don't know, but it's possible.
It's a possibility, and the more successful the strategy is, the greater the skewing, and therefore the greater the likelihood of the Electoral Commission intervening. And there's also the possibility of allegations of collusion. That's two different parties colluding and actually acting as one party, which is also not legitimate. I won't go so far as to say that it's illegal, because I haven't been able to verify that as yet. But it is certainly, it would give the Electoral Commission cause to make an intervention. So if this strategy were successful, it could be very dangerous. It could lead to this intervention, and what would ensue from that, we would have to assume, would be a British government revision of the whole system. And you can be pretty sure any revision would not benefit the independence movement. I think we can be certain of that. So there is a danger there.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so in conclusion, excuse me, so it is achievable on paper. We've just demonstrated that. But it is hypothetical at this stage. It's unlike the standalone SNP majority, which is theoretically possible. It's possible because it's happened before. Happened in 2011. This hasn't happened before. There are a lot of assumptions, and as well as a lot of caveats and provisos. We'll just run through some of them now. First of all, the assumption is that the SNP will dominate heavily in the constituencies. That looks like a pretty sound assumption. All the opinion polls are pointing to that. There's been a couple of opinion polls out since, there was one today, there was one about 3 days ago, subsequent to this opinion poll. Excuse me, they say the same thing. And they say that the SNP are going to dominate the constituencies, and they're going to get nothing on the list, or very little on the list, despite having the greatest share of the vote. The other thing is, you will need local polling knowledge, and most particularly an engaged and educated electorate that will act en masse in the way that advocates of this approach want them to. I'm not sure how engaged and educated the electorate are on the AMS or any other voting system other than the first past the post system. It's possible you can double your money. You could, if you're lucky, if the stars align, you could get a voter can achieve. Get somebody elected on the constituency that he votes for, and also on the region. They split their votes. At the same time, it's possible it could backfire. You get neither. It's a risk-reward sort of trade-off there. This is an important point. The next point about the size of the vote transfer that's needed to be achieved, given the advent of reform, or the advent of a very competitive reform this time around. It amounts to that 25% vote share that we were talking about. Or at least I was talking about, it amounts to about 700,000 votes for 2/3 of the MSPs to be achieved, assuming the same turnout that happened in 2021. There'll be, as we were talking about at length there, the cannibalization of the existing pro-independence vote. It's not an increase in the vote share, so you won't be getting majority of the votes on the basis of the opinion polls have been looking at now, you're just shifting it around, moving it around a little bit, reallocating it. Creates greater disproportionality in the parliament, and then there's the chance, not just I'd say the high likelihood that there'll be lots of accusations, lots of wailing about the gaming of the system, manipulation of the system, and abuse, general abuse of the system. So that's the conclusion. Just a couple of extra comments. Given what I've just said there, it would, I believe, a super mandate would be a more stable basis for carrying out the actions that we want to be seen to be taken. That is, you get a majority of the votes on the list and on the constituency. The seats will take care of themselves. You will have a majority then. If you've got a majority across all three, that's a very stable basis. Nobody can say that you're manipulating the system, or more importantly, that you've not got the popular vote behind you. You've got that moral high ground. Very important, that I would suggest. Of course, if you don't have a plan or a means or a plan, a process outlined which will get you to where we all seemingly want to get to, which is namely the return of the independent statehood to Scotland, then none of it really matters.
Right. Yeah, that is a pretty comprehensive overview there, Stephen. Thanks very much. I come into this point. I remembered the point that I was going to make earlier on, and that was about the usefulness of this supermajority. I mean, why go for a supermajority? It's easy to see the immediate appeal, the superficial appeal of ejecting the British politicians who are squatting in our parliament. I mean, I love the sound of that, and if I were superficial myself, then I would probably go for it. I'm not superficial. I overthink things rather than underthink. So what is the use of a supermajority? Well, first of all, let's deal with this, the actual supermajority. What could be done with that supermajority? The only thing relevant to the constitutional issue, and even then it's only tangentially relevant, that a supermajority could do would be to, in theory, force an election by dissolving the parliament. Although that's only in theory. They could dissolve the parliament. They could bring down the government, but it would not necessarily lead to a new election or a new government, because having brought down the existing government, the presiding officer then has 28 days to see if they can cobble together another government that could credibly muddle through until the next normal election, rather than hold an extraordinary general election. That's something that they try to avoid. The system is designed to try and avoid. So it wouldn't necessarily mean new elections. And how popular would that be with the electorate anyway? And there's always the risk, slight as it might be, but there's always the risk that the anti-independence parties, the British parties, could form some sort of allegiance, cobble together a government, and that would be disastrous. That would be even the nominally pro-independence parties closed out of power. And once they're closed out, I think we can be pretty sure that they'd be forever closed out. So that's the actual supermajority. A very large majority, well, I've spoken about that before. There is nothing that you can do with 76 MSPs that you can't do with 67. A very large majority is is useless. It doesn't actually achieve anything. It doesn't give you any more power. A majority is a majority, a minority is a minority. And so long as you've got a majority, then the other side must have this binary. And you can work with that. The extra MPs don't give you anything at all. Sorry, MSPs. Am I right so far?
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with that logic, Peter.
Yeah, so it's taking the risk of this Electoral Commission intervention by destroying the proportionality of the Parliament, at the same time undermining the democratic legitimacy of the Parliament for the sake of something which is of no practical value. Is that a fair summary?
I think it is, because I think apart from, as you say, the sort of nice warm feeling of Schadenfreude you would get from knocking out from knocking a few of these the squatters from the Parliament, there's nothing great.
Why did Murdo Fraser's name pop into my head there?
Douglas Ross, but nothing much more would come from that. I think I'd be very, if a party was to stand and had a real plan for getting us to independence, then I think it's worth the risk of going for the supermajority. I do think that. That's a personal opinion. I think it's worth it, because if you've got a party with a plan, then you given the state of play at the moment and the independence movement being so fragmented and everything stacked against us, I think it would be worthwhile taking that opportunity, but only very important, if you increase the vote to get a majority of the votes, and certainly on the list, but preferably on the constituency as well. A lot of people, this is not yourself, Peter, but a lot of people are always quoting the Irish situation from 1918. When the Sinn Féin came from absolutely nowhere, won the greatest bulk of the vote and a whole bunch of seats. I think it was 105 seats. They won 73 seats. But even though they got a huge bulk of the vote, it was actually under 50%, 47% of the vote. They got 70% of the seats that were overrepresented in Ireland in 1918. The
sorry,
student ticket of independence.
You're breaking up a bit there, Stephen.
The Irish Parliamentary Party got the 20 seats. And okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, but video and audio breaking up. I'm afraid this is the same problem as we've had before. Later on, it's starting to break up later on. Please try and finish making your point.
Okay, I can see you and hear you. So the point being that the Sinn Féin got less than 50% of the vote, got 73% of the seats, established Doyle on the back of a minority of votes, and we know what happened next. It wasn't good. So even though they were the great majority, or the plurality of votes, they didn't get a majority, but declared independence effectively. We don't want to be in that situation. We want to have a majority of the vote.
Right. Yeah. This gets back to the issue, and I'm going to just move in. Time's getting on anyway, Stephen, and you're breaking up. So I'm going to thank you and finish with a few remarks of my own. Sorry to cut you off like this, but when it starts breaking up like that, we're not hearing anything you say anyway. So we'll leave it at that, and look forward to you joining us again next Sunday. Yes, when you'll be starting something new. We'll look forward to that, Stephen.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Let me see. There we go, and switch that off. Sorry, I'm talking myself through the process here. Yeah, there's a conclusion from this is that Stephen was saying there that he thinks that the supermajority idea or the very large majority idea might be good, it might be effective if there was a party that had an actual plan, an actual strategy for restoring independence. We know that they don't. None of the existing nominally pro-independence parties has such a strategy. None of them is able to say exactly how they would go about restoring independence. And Stephen mentioned a party with a strategy, but I would actually say that for the supermajority approach to be effective, it would not have to be one party. It would have to be all of by that point, genuinely pro-independence parties. That's all hypothetical because there are no genuinely pro-independence parties in the race at the moment. And what did come up there in Stephen's talk was the subject of a super mandate, which is actually my preference and which should be everybody's preference. I define a super mandate as a working majority, not necessarily a super majority or even a very large majority. A simple working majority is all that's required. A working majority of genuinely pro-independence MSPs, all with exactly the same strategy proposal in their manifestos, and a majority of the popular vote on both ballots. That is a super majority, and with that, you can pretty much do whatever you like. It wouldn't necessarily have to be quite as super as that. A majority, over 50% of the constituency vote would suffice, for example. So long as there's that working majority and over 50% on at least one of the ballots, I would call that a super mandate. And a super mandate is actually useful. A supermajority isn't. So what is happening here is that we have the situation that we have right across the independence movement, that people are being distracted, diverted from something useful and something that actually helps Scotland's cause by something that doesn't, something that actually has been devised not with restoring independence in mind, but with getting particular politicians and particular parties seats in the Scottish Parliament and the not inconsiderable rewards that go along with that. When you're thinking in terms of winning seats rather than restoring independence, you come up with different solutions. You come up with solutions for the problem that you are addressing. How do we win seats? If you're thinking in terms of restoring independence, you come up with solutions designed for that purpose. That just seems obvious to me. And all the nominally pro-independence parties that exist at the moment are all thinking in terms of electoral success and the rewards which ensue from that. Our time is just about up, so I'm going to leave it there, and I think you'll find you'll agree it's been very interesting today. Once again, thanks Stephen Duncan for that. I'll be with you again on Wednesday when I'll be moaning about something, because I'm Pete Bell and I am a proud malcontent. For now, goodbye.